"Mom, he's moving!" Girl shouts at elderly man's funeral who was about to be buried. The wake for Mr. William Johnson was taking place in respectful silence in the small town of Millbrook in rural Pennsylvania. Family and acquaintances had gathered to bid their final farewell to the respected pharmacist, who for over 5 decades had cared for the health of the local residents. That was when a sharp scream cut through the heavy air of the room. Emily, a girl of just 8 years old, pointed with a trembling finger at the casket. "Mom, he's moving!" she exclaimed, drawing all eyes to her. Rachel, her mother, felt her face burn with embarrassment as she pulled her daughter closer. "Hush, Emily. We don't say things like that," she whispered firmly, noticing the murmurs of disapproval already circulating among those present. "Emily, don't make things up." Rachel gripped her daughter's arm tighter, trying to pull her away from the center of attention. The girl, with her dark curly hair framing a delicate face, pulled back, resisting. "But Mom, I saw it. His fingers moved, I swear," she insisted, her wide eyes fixed on the casket. An elderly woman nearby shook her head in disapproval. "Kids these days have no respect for anything," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Richard, Mr. Johnson's eldest son, approached Rachel with a stern expression. "Please control your daughter. This is a difficult time for all of us," he said, his voice choked but firm. Rachel nodded, ashamed. Her standing in town hadn't been the best since she'd been removed from the health clinic after a medication incident. Now, with Emily's behavior, she felt everyone would judge her even more. "Let's go, Emily," she whispered, pulling the girl toward the door. "No, Mom, you don't understand." Emily struggled, trying to get back to the casket. "He needs help." People began exchanging uncomfortable glances. Some whispered, while others watched the scene with pity. Rachel finally managed to drag Emily out of the room, but not before the girl cried out once more, "Please, someone look, he's breathing." Outside Wilson Funeral Home, Rachel knelt in front of her daughter, holding her shoulders firmly. "Emily, what's gotten into you? You know how hard things are for me in this town. Why are you making things up?" The girl's eyes filled with tears, but there was no regret in them, only frustration. "I'm not making it up, Mom, I saw it." His fingers moved, and he made a little sound with his mouth like he was trying to breathe. "Why won't anyone believe me?" Rachel sighed deeply, feeling a pang of guilt. Emily had always been a sensitive and observant child, never one to tell tall tales. But this time it had to be her imagination. People didn't come back to life in caskets. "Sweetheart, when people pass, they don't come back. Mr. Johnson is at rest, understand? His body sometimes makes involuntary movements, but that doesn't mean he's alive." Emily lowered her head, but something in her gaze said she wasn't convinced. Inside the funeral home, the wake continued. Michael, Mr. Johnson's grandson, and a doctor who had left the profession after failing to save his own wife from a rare illness, watched the troubled exit of the woman and child. For some reason he couldn't explain, the girl's words echoed in his mind. "He's breathing." Michael looked at his grandfather in the casket, the pale skin, the hands folded over his chest, the serene expression as if he were only sleeping. A flicker of doubt struck him. As a doctor, even though he'd stepped away, he knew diagnostic errors, though rare, did happen. He discreetly moved closer to the casket, adjusting his tie as an excuse to lean in nearer to his grandfather's face. That's when he noticed something that made his heart race, a faint, almost imperceptible movement in the skin near the jugular. Michael swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure as his mind raced. Could it be possible? Or was he seeing things that weren't there, influenced by that child's words? "Are you okay, Michael?" asked his Aunt Patricia, Mr. Johnson's youngest daughter, approaching with a handkerchief in hand. "Yes, just saying goodbye," he replied, stepping away from the casket reluctantly. Michael watched his aunt walk away and rejoin conversations with other family members. Patricia had fiercely argued with her father weeks before his supposed passing, something about selling the family's old pharmacy, which Mr. Johnson refused to do despite their financial struggles. Meanwhile, Rachel was taking Emily home, trying to calm her down the whole way. The girl had gone quiet, but her eyes showed an unusual determination for someone so young. "You didn't even know Mr. Johnson that well, Emily. Why are you so upset?" I saw him tending to the plants in the pharmacy garden when we walked by. He always smiled at me, and once he gave me a mint candy," the girl replied, staring out the bus window. "He's a good person, Mom, and he's not dead." Rachel sighed again, worried about her daughter's fixation. Maybe it was the emotional aftermath of the recent separation. Ever since Robert, her ex-husband, had left 8 months ago, Emily had become more withdrawn and sensitive. When they arrived at their small apartment, Emily ran to her room and closed the door. Rachel respected her daughter's space, figuring she needed to process what had happened. Little did she know, Emily was grabbing her colored pencils and frantically drawing Mr. Johnson awake, climbing out of the casket, as if she needed to put what she'd seen onto paper. Back at the funeral home, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Discreetly, he touched his grandfather's wrist and felt an electric jolt run through him when he detected what seemed like a faint but present pulse. My God, he thought, his heart pounding. The girl was right. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. Michael needed to act fast but without causing panic. If he announced his grandfather was still alive, he'd be seen as crazy, or worse, as someone trying to prolong the family's suffering. He needed medical help, immediately but discreetly. He quickly stepped into the hallway and called an old colleague from the hospital where he'd worked. "David, I need an urgent favor. It's an emergency, but it has to be discreet," he whispered. "Michael, it's been a while. What's going on?" "I need you to come to Wilson Funeral Home right away with equipment to check vital signs. I think my grandfather was declared dead by mistake." There was silence on the other end. "Michael, are you sure? This is extremely serious." "I'm not 100% sure, which is why I need your help. Please, David, you know I wouldn't. Ask if it wasn't important." "I'm on my way. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Michael returned to the viewing room, his heart racing. He looked at his grandfather again and now felt certain. A slight rosy hue was returning to cheeks that had been completely pale. The funeral home attendant announced they'd soon have to close the casket for transport to the cemetery. The tension inside Michael grew. Where was David? The minutes felt like hours as he discreetly watched his grandfather, noticing small signs that untrained eyes would easily miss. Finally, David arrived, disguised with a bouquet of flowers as if he were just another visitor. He approached Michael, who led him to a corner. "He's in the casket. I need you to confirm my suspicion before we do anything." David nodded, and discreetly they both approached the casket. While Michael distracted some family members, David managed to place a small device near Mr. Johnson's chest, disguising the movement as if he were adjusting the lapel of the suit. Seconds later, the device in his pocket vibrated. David looked at the small screen, and his eyes widened. He gave Michael an almost imperceptible signal, positive. Michael felt a mix of relief and panic. He was right. His grandfather was alive in a state of deep catalepsy, about to be buried. "We need to act now," David whispered. "I'll call an ambulance." Michael nodded and, taking a deep breath, walked to the center of the room. His heart pounded so loudly it felt like everyone could hear it. "Excuse me, family." His voice wavered slightly, but he steadied himself. "I need to say something important." All eyes turned to him. He saw his Uncle Richard's face furrow in confusion. Patricia stopped drying her tears, looking at him curiously. "I believe there's been a mistake." Michael swallowed hard. "My grandfather might be alive." A murmur of shock spread through the room. Richard stepped forward, anger growing on his face. "What are you saying? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "No, Uncle, I'm a doctor, even if I've stepped away. I observed vital signs in Grandpa. David just confirmed it. There's a weak pulse, but it's there. This is outrageous." Patricia moved closer, aggressive. "Do you want to prolong our suffering? 2 doctors certified his death." That's when the sound of sirens grew, outside. David had called the ambulance without anyone noticing. "Please, trust me. If I'm wrong, I'll take full responsibility, but we can't risk burying someone who's still alive," Michael pleaded. The room erupted into heated arguments. Some demanded Michael be thrown out. Others wanted to give his theory a chance. Richard finally raised his hand, silencing everyone. "Let the paramedics check. If this is Michael's mistake, he'll never be welcome in this family again." The paramedics quickly entered and, under the watchful eyes of everyone, began checking. Mr. Johnson's vital signs. A deathly silence filled the room as they worked. Finally, the more experienced paramedic looked at the family. "There are vital signs, though very weak. This man is alive." The room burst into exclamations of shock and disbelief. Some cried, others prayed, some were simply frozen by the news. Michael felt immense relief, but he knew the battle for his grandfather's life had only just begun. As Mr. Johnson was carefully transferred to the stretcher and taken to the ambulance, Richard approached Michael, tears in his eyes. How did you notice?" Michael hesitated for a moment. "Actually, it was that little girl. She saw it first. Said he was moving, but no one believed her." Richard shook his head, stunned. "My God, we almost buried Dad alive." At the hospital, specialist doctors were called to evaluate Mr. Johnson. The diagnosis, a rare case of deep catalepsy, a state that perfectly mimics the absence of life. The doctor who had certified the death was newly graduated, filling in for the family's regular doctor who was on vacation. The news spread quickly through the small town. Rachel learned about it through a message from an old colleague at the health clinic. Her first thought was Emily. "Emily!" she called, entering her daughter's room. "You were right. Mr. Johnson is alive." The girl looked at her mother, not surprised at all. "I know," she simply replied, showing the drawings she had made. "I saw." Rachel sat on the bed, looking at the colorful sketches that depicted Mr. Johnson waking up smiling and tending to his plants again. Suddenly she realized there was something special about her daughter, a sensitivity that went beyond the ordinary. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she said, hugging Emily tightly. The girl returned the embrace. "Can we go see him at the hospital? I want to know if he's okay." Rachel hesitated. She didn't know the Johnson family well, and considering the scene Emily had caused at the wake, she wasn't sure they'd be welcome. But her daughter's determined look convinced her. "We can try early tomorrow." At the hospital, the Johnson family gathered, torn between relief and shock. Michael explained to everyone about catalepsy, a rare condition where the body enters a state that mimics death, with heartbeat and breathing so faint they can go unnoticed. Richard, as the eldest son, took charge of the situation, organizing shifts so someone would always be with their father. Patricia, however, seemed distant, preoccupied with something beyond her father's recovery. "We need to talk about the paperwork," she said to Richard when they were alone in the hallway. "The sale of the pharmacy. This isn't the time." "Patricia," Richard cut in, irritated. "Our father was nearly buried alive and you're worried about documents." Patricia stepped back, but there was something in her gaze that left Michael, who was watching from a distance, puzzled. The next morning, Rachel and Emily arrived at the hospital. The receptionist eyed them suspiciously when they asked to visit Mr. Johnson. "Are you relatives?" "No, Rachel hesitated. "We're family friends." The receptionist was about to deny them access when Michael appeared in the lobby. He immediately recognized the girl from the wake. "You," he exclaimed, approaching. "You're the girl who saw my grandfather move." Emily nodded timidly, half hiding behind her mother. "Please, come with me," Michael invited, to the receptionist's surprise. "You're very welcome." As they rode the elevator, Michael introduced himself formally. "I'm Michael Johnson, Mr. Johnson's grandson. I wanted to thank you personally. If it weren't for you, little one, my grandfather would have—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Has he woken up yet?" Emily asked eagerly. "Not yet. The doctors say he's stable but still unconscious. They're optimistic, though." When they reached the room, they found Richard sitting by the bed holding his father's hand. He looked up in surprise at the visitors. "This is the girl who saw him first, Dad," Michael explained. "She wanted to know how Grandpa is doing." Richard stood and approached Emily, kneeling to her level. "How did you know?" he asked, without accusation, just sincere curiosity. Emily shrugged. "I just saw." His fingers moved, and he made a noise with his mouth, like he wanted to say something. Richard glanced at Rachel, who introduced herself and explained the awkward situation at the wake. The man shook his head regretfully. "We're the ones who should apologize. If we'd listened to your daughter right away, the important thing is he was saved in time," Rachel interrupted, not wanting to dwell on the discomfort. Emily walked to the bed where Mr. Johnson lay, connected to various machines. His white hair contrasted with his now rosier complexion. The girl placed her small hand over his. "He'll wake up soon," she said with conviction. "He's just resting." Something in the child's confident voice brought comfort to everyone in the room. Richard and Michael exchanged glances, as if wanting to believe in that childlike certainty. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, Patricia met secretly with a lawyer. "We need to invalidate any documents he signs from now on," she murmured nervously. "I can claim he's not in full mental capacity after the incident." The lawyer seemed uncomfortable. "Miss Johnson, your father just survived a misdiagnosis of death. Perhaps we should wait before discussing legal matters." "There's no time," she insisted. "The offer for the pharmacy is only valid until the end of the month. I need to make sure the sale goes through." What Patricia didn't know was that Julia, the hospital nurse and a former employee of Mr. Johnson's pharmacy, was passing through the hallway at that very moment and overheard part of the conversation. Horrified by what she heard, she decided she had to warn someone in the family. Back in the room, Emily had settled into a chair beside the bed and was now telling stories to Mr. Johnson as if he could hear her. She talked about school, her pet kitten, and the plants she saw on her way home. "When you get better, can you teach me how to take care of plants?" she asked the unconscious elderly man. "My mom always kills ours." Rachel blushed while Richard and Michael smiled at the child's innocence. "My father would love that," Richard remarked. "He always said plants are like people. They need affection, patience, and a good conversation." Just then, Julia hurried into the room, her face filled with concern. "Mr. Richard, may I speak with you privately?" she asked, giving him a meaningful look. Richard excused himself and stepped out with the nurse. Michael, worried by Julia's expression, followed them. In the hallway, the nurse recounted what she had overheard between Patricia and the lawyer. "She wants to make sure the pharmacy sale goes through, even against Mr. Johnson's wishes," Julia concluded. "I thought you should know." Richard clenched his fists, furious. "I knew that argument between her and Dad was serious, but I never imagined she'd go this far." "What do we do?" Michael asked, concerned. "For now, we won't let Patricia be alone with Dad, and I'll talk to Dr. Wilson about his actual condition to protect ourselves legally." While they discussed in the hallway, something extraordinary happened inside the room. Emily kept talking to Mr. Johnson, now showing him the drawings she had made of him. "Look, I drew you taking care of the plants, and here you're smiling, just like when you gave me that peppermint candy." Rachel watched her daughter tenderly when she noticed a subtle movement in the old man's hand. She held her breath, unsure if it was just her imagination, but then it happened again. Mr. Johnson's fingers twitched slightly. "Emily," she called, her voice trembling. "Keep talking to him." The little girl, not understanding her mother's excitement, continued. "And here I drew you in your pharmacy coat. The lady who lives near us said you always helped people who couldn't afford medicine." This time there was no doubt. Mr. Johnson's fingers curled slightly around Emily's small hand. Rachel rushed to the door. "Michael, Richard, come quick," she called urgently. The two men hurried inside, followed by Julia. Everyone watched in awe as Mr. Johnson faintly moved his fingers in response to Emily's voice. "Keep talking, sweetheart," Michael encouraged, while Julia checked the monitors. "His vitals are getting stronger," the nurse announced hopefully. "Keep going, little one." Emily, now understanding the importance of the moment, held the old man's hand more firmly. "Mr. Johnson, everyone's waiting for you to wake up. Your plants too. I saw you. Have a beautiful rose bush in front of the pharmacy. It has red flowers now." To everyone's surprise, the elderly man's lips moved slightly as if trying to speak. "I'll get the doctor," said Julia, quickly leaving. Richard and Michael positioned themselves on the other side of the bed, both with tears in their eyes. Rachel stayed beside her daughter, watching the miracle unfolding before their eyes. "Rose," whispered Mr. Johnson, so softly they could barely hear. Yes, red roses, exclaimed Emily, excited. Do you like roses? The old man's eyes slowly opened, unfocused at first, until they found Emily's smiling face. A look of confusion crossed his features. Helen? He murmured hoarsely. Emily glanced at the adults, puzzled. Richard leaned over his father. Dad, it's me, Richard. You're in the hospital. Mr. Johnson blinked a few times, seeming to gather his thoughts. Just then, Dr. Wilson hurried into the room, followed by Julia and a medical team. Please, everyone needs to leave so we can evaluate the patient, he requested, already beginning to examine Mr. Johnson. Reluctantly, everyone left the room except Richard, who insisted on staying. In the hallway, Michael impulsively hugged Emily. You're amazing, you know that? He said, emotional. You saved my grandfather twice at the funeral home and now. The girl smiled shyly. I just wanted him to be okay. He seems like a really good person. And he is, Michael confirmed, wiping his tears. One of the kindest men I've ever known. It was then that Patricia appeared in the hallway, accompanied by the lawyer. Seeing the commotion around her father's room, her face paled. What happened? She asked, her voice trembling. Dad woke up, Michael announced with a hint of coldness, and he seems lucid. The lawyer exchanged a quick glance with Patricia before discreetly excusing himself. Michael noticed the gesture and narrowed his eyes suspiciously. What's going on, Patricia? He asked bluntly. Why do you have a lawyer here? Before she could answer, Dr. Wilson stepped out of the room with a cautious smile. He's conscious and oriented, though still weak, he announced to the family. Say it's truly remarkable. Cases of recovery from such deep catalepsy are extremely rare. Can we see him? Michael asked eagerly. Yes, but only 2 at a time and briefly. He needs rest. Michael looked at Emily and Rachel. You two should go first, he suggested, surprising Patricia. Emily has a special way with him. Rachel hesitated. Are you sure? You're his family. And you're the reason he's alive, Michael said firmly. Please go ahead. Rachel nodded gratefully, and holding Emily's hand, re-entered the room. Mr. Johnson was sitting up, the head of the bed slightly raised. His face, though tired, showed surprising vitality for someone who had nearly been buried alive. Hello again, Emily greeted, approaching the bed. Do you remember me? The old man studied the girl's face intently. You're the little girl who spoke to me, he replied, his voice still weak. You showed me drawings. Emily smiled brightly. Yes, and before in the casket I saw you moving, but no one believed me. Mr. Johnson gave a faint smile. Then I owe you my life, little one. Sorry about her behavior, Rachel interjected. I'm Rachel, Emily's mother. She really wanted to... See you. There's nothing to apologize for, the old man replied, his eyes fixed on Emily. There's something familiar about you, child. You remind me of someone... Emily tilted her head curiously. Who? Someone very special I knew a long time ago, he answered with a touch of melancholy. Helen. Rachel noticed the emotion in his voice and decided not to press further. We're so glad you're recovering, Mr. Johnson. Emily was very worried about you. The elderly man reached out his hand to the girl, who took it without hesitation. Thank you for not giving up on me, Emily. I promise that when I get better, I'll teach you everything about plants, just like you asked. The girl's face lit up. Do you really promise? A pharmacist's word, he replied, his eyes twinkling. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, Mr. Johnson's recovery surprised the medical team. His vitality improved each day, though he still had moments of confusion and fatigue. Emily visited the hospital daily after school, always bringing new drawings and stories that seemed to visibly speed up the old man's recovery. A special bond had formed between the girl and Mr. Johnson. He eagerly waited for her every day, and his mood brightened considerably after her visits. For Rachel, it was fascinating to watch their interaction, so natural, as if they'd known each other for years. Meanwhile, tension grew in the Johnson family. Richard had discovered documents proving Patricia was negotiating the sale of the Pharmacy without their father's consent, using an old power of attorney he'd signed during a previous illness. How could you do this? Richard confronted his sister in a heated argument in the hospital hallway. Dad built that pharmacy with a lifetime of hard work. He's being stubborn and sentimental, Patricia defended herself. The pharmacy has been losing money for years. This sale would give us financial stability, especially for him. He needs constant care now. Don't try to justify your greed as concern, Michael retorted, watching the argument. We all know you're drowning in debt because of that con artist boyfriend of yours. Patricia paled. Don't drag Alexander into this. Alexander, who conveniently showed up right after you found out you were the main beneficiary in Grandpa's will, Michael accused. I'm not stupid, Patricia. The argument was interrupted by the arrival of Emily and Rachel. The girl carried a small potted plant in a vase she had decorated herself. We brought a gift for Mr. Johnson, Emily announced, oblivious to the tension in the air. It's a mini rosebush. The florist said it'll bloom pink roses. Richard forced a smile, trying to mask the earlier dispute. He'll love it, Emily. Go ahead. He's waiting for you. The girl cheerfully entered the room, while Rachel lingered in the hallway, sensing she'd interrupted something important. I'm sorry, we can come back later if it's better. No, please stay, Richard said, running a hand through his graying hair. Emily is the best thing that's happened to Dad these days. Rachel nodded, still uneasy. Is everything okay? It sounded like a serious argument. Michael and Richard exchanged hesitant glances. Just family disagreements, Richard replied diplomatically. Nothing to worry about. Inside the room, Emily proudly presented her gift to Mr. Johnson, who smiled tenderly at the little plant. This is so you won't miss your garden while you're here, she explained. And when you go home, you can plant it there. It's perfect, Emily, he thanked her, gently touching the green leaves. Did you know pink roses symbolize gratitude and appreciation? The girl shook her head, fascinated. Every rose color has a different meaning. Red ones stand for love, white ones for purity, he continued, his eyes distant as if reliving memories. Helen loved pink roses. Who's Helen? Emily asked, curiously. You mentioned her when you woke up. The elderly man fell silent for a moment, as if debating internally whether to share that story. Helen was my first love, he finally answered in a soft voice. We met when we were very young, right after I graduated from pharmacy school. And what happened to her? Life pulled us apart, he sighed. I had to return home to take over my father's pharmacy after he fell ill, and she had big dreams in the city. We promised to wait for each other, but what? Emily pressed, completely engrossed in the story. I received a letter saying she had found someone else. I was devastated, but eventually I met Catherine, the mother of my children, and we built a good life together. And you never saw Helen again? Mr. Johnson shook his head slowly. Never again. But you know something curious, Emily? You remind me so much of her. The same expressive eyes, the same way you tilt your head when you're curious. The girl smiled, flattered by the comparison. Maybe that's why you like me so much. Maybe. That's why you saved my life, he replied, his eyes glistening, like an angel sent from the past. At that moment, Rachel entered the room, followed by Michael. Is everything all right here? She asked, noticing the emotion on Mr. Johnson's face. We're fine, Emily answered. Mr. Johnson was telling me about Helen, his first love. Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. Helen, I've never heard of her. It was a long time ago, before I even met your grandmother, Mr. Johnson explained. Some stories stay tucked away in the heart. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Rachel noticed Emily lost in thought. What's wrong, sweetheart? Are you worried about something? Emily stayed quiet for a moment, pushing food around her plate. Mom, what was your mother's name? The question caught Rachel off guard. You know Grandma's name? It was Helen. Why? And she lived here in this town when she was young? Rachel frowned, puzzled by the sudden interest. Yes, she was born and raised here. She only moved to New York after marrying your grandfather. Why all these questions? Emily set down her fork and looked straight at her mother, her eyes shining with realization. Mr. Johnson knew Grandma. She was the love of his life. Rachel laughed, amused by her daughter's imagination. Emily, that's unlikely. Millbrook may be small, but not everyone knows each other. But he said Helen had eyes just like mine, and Grandma did too. You always say that. And Grandma lived here when she was young, around the same time as him. Rachel hesitated, starting to consider the possibility. Her mother rarely spoke about her youth, but she always had a special fondness for this small town, insisting Rachel move here after her divorce. It's an interesting coincidence, but it's not a coincidence, Emily insisted. We have to find out if it's the same Helen. Can we take a picture of Grandma tomorrow? Rachel sighed, giving in to her daughter's excitement. All right, we can take that old photo I have of her on the dresser. But don't get your hopes up, sweetheart. They're probably different people. The next day, Emily could barely focus at school, eager to visit Mr. Johnson with her grandmother's photo. As soon as the bell rang, she ran to meet Rachel, who was waiting at the gate. "Did you bring the photo?" she asked immediately. Rachel nodded, showing an envelope in her bag. "Yes, but remember what we talked about. Don't be disappointed if it's not the same person." At the hospital, they found Mr. Johnson's room empty. For a moment, Emily panicked, fearing something bad had happened. But a nurse quickly informed them he had been moved to a shared room 1 floor below, a good sign of his recovery. When they reached the new room, they found Mr. Johnson. William sat in a chair near the window, looking much stronger than in previous days. Richard was with him, helping with some physical therapy exercises. "Emily," the elderly man exclaimed when he saw her, his face lighting up. "I was just thinking about you." The girl ran to hug him, careful not to hurt him. "You're in a chair. Does that mean you're better?" "Much better, thanks to you and your magical drawings," he teased, pointing to the wall where Emily had hung several of her creations. Richard greeted Rachel with a nod. "The doctors are optimistic. If he keeps improving, he could be discharged in a week." "That's wonderful," Rachel replied, genuinely happy for the old man's recovery. Emily, barely able to contain her excitement, looked at her mother, silently asking for permission to show the photo. Rachel gave a subtle nod. "Mr. Johnson, we brought something to show you," Emily began, pulling the envelope from her mother's bag. "It's a picture of my grandmother when she was young." The old man seemed intrigued, but accepted the photo Emily handed him. The moment his eyes landed on the image, all color drained from his face. His hands trembled so much that Richard stepped forward, concerned. "Dad, are you all right?" Mr. Johnson didn't answer, completely absorbed in the photograph in his hands. It showed a young woman in her 20s, with dark hair and expressive eyes, smiling at the camera in front of a garden. "Helen?" he finally whispered. His voice choked. "My Helen." Richard looked confusedly at Rachel, who also seemed shocked by his reaction. "Dad, do you know this woman?" "Know her," Mr. Johnson repeated, tears streaming freely down his wrinkled face. "She was the love of my life." Emily squeezed her mother's hand, thrilled to have her theory confirmed. "Grandma Helen is the same Helen Mr. Johnson knew," she exclaimed. Rachel stepped closer, still processing the revelation. "Mr. Johnson, this is my mother, Helen Carter. She passed away 5 years ago." The old man closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the news of Helen's passing. "I always wondered what happened to her," he said, tenderly stroking the photograph. "She married then?" "Yes, to my father, William," Rachel replied. "They were together nearly 40 years until he passed 8 years ago." Mr. Johnson nodded slowly. Was she happy? The question, so simple yet so profound, touched Rachel's heart. Yes, she was, but she never forgot this town. She always spoke of Millbrook with special fondness. Now I understand why. The old man looked again at the photo, then at Emily, and finally at Rachel. "You have her eyes," he observed. "And Emily. Emily is the image of her when she was young. The same spirit, the same determination. So that's why you thought I looked familiar," Emily concluded excitedly. "I look like Grandma." "Just like her," Mr. Johnson confirmed, wiping his tears. "Even the way you stand by your beliefs, no matter who doubts you." Richard, who had watched the whole scene in silence, finally spoke. "Dad, you never told us about Helen." Some pains are too deep to share, son, the old man replied. When I got the letter saying she had found someone else, I decided to bury that part of my life. I met your mother soon after, and you all became my world. Rachel suddenly remembered something. Wait, what letter? My mother never mentioned sending a letter ending a relationship. Mr. Johnson frowned. It was 1964. I had stayed in Millbrook to take care of my father's pharmacy. He was ill. Helen had gotten a scholarship to New York. We promised to wait for each other. Then about 6 months later, I received a letter saying she had met someone else and wouldn't be coming back. Rachel shook her head, confused. That doesn't make sense. My mother only met my father in 1966, nearly 2 years later, and she always said she left here heartbroken. How? Mr. Johnson leaned forward, surprise evident on his face. But the letter... What letter is that, Grandpa? Interrupted Michael, who had just entered the room and caught the end of the conversation. Is everything okay here? Mr. Johnson looked at his grandson, then at Rachel and Emily. Michael, I need you to go to my house. In my office, at the back of the third desk drawer, there's a carved wooden box. Bring it to me, please. Michael nodded, intrigued, and quickly left the room. Mr. Johnson turned his attention back to Rachel. If what you're saying is true, something very strange happened 60 years ago. Now it all makes sense, murmured Emily, who had been unusually quiet, reflecting on the story. That's why you saw me when no one else could. The old man smiled at the girl. Perhaps you're right, little one. Maybe our hearts recognized each other. While they waited for Michael, Richard suggested they all have coffee at the hospital cafeteria, except Emily, who asked for hot chocolate. The conversation flowed naturally, with Mr. Johnson sharing stories of his youth with Helen and Rachel recounting memories of her mother. She always kept a rose garden at our house, Rachel said. Mostly pink roses. She said they had a special meaning. Gratitude and recognition, Mr. Johnson added with a nostalgic smile, and also admiration and affection. You mean love, corrected Emily with the innocent wisdom of children. She still loved you. Richard seemed moved by the revelation. It's incredible to think you could have been my father if things had been different, he said to Rachel, who nodded, equally struck by the idea. An hour later, Michael returned with a beautifully carved wooden box. Mr. Johnson took it with trembling hands. I haven't opened this box in decades, he confessed, running his fingers over the carvings. I thought it would be easier to move on if I kept all the memories locked away. Carefully he lifted the lid, revealing a small treasure trove of mementos. Letters yellowed with age, ribbons, a rose-shaped brooch, old photographs, and on top of it all, an envelope with feminine handwriting. This is the letter, he said, carefully removing it. The letter that changed my life. He handed the envelope to Rachel, who examined it closely. This isn't my mother's handwriting, she said with certainty. I know her writing well. Who could have written this? Mr. Johnson looked stunned. Not hers, but who? Just then, Patricia walked into the room, interrupting the conversation. Her eyes immediately fixed on the open box and the letter in Rachel's hands. What's going on here? She asked, a note of nervousness in her voice. Richard quickly explained the situation, showing the photograph of Helen and recounting the incredible coincidence they'd uncovered. Patricia listened, her expression growing paler by the minute. We should leave this story in the past, she suggested, trying to close the box. Dad needs rest, not to be upset by old memories. Wait, Michael interjected, holding his aunt's arm. Why are you so nervous about this? Patricia pulled her arm away, visibly agitated. I'm not nervous, just worried about his health. All this excitement can't be good. It was then that Emily, who had been silently observing everything, pointed to a photograph that had fallen from the box. Who's that girl with Mr. Johnson? She asked innocently. Michael picked up the photograph and examined it. He showed his grandfather as a young man next to a woman who was neither Helen nor his grandmother, Catherine. Grandpa, who is this? Mr. Johnson adjusted his glasses and studied the image. This is Elizabeth, Catherine's younger sister. She worked at the pharmacy for a while before moving to Los Angeles. Richard's eyes widened with sudden understanding. Elizabeth was always in love with you, wasn't she, Dad? Mom used to mention it sometimes. The elderly man nodded absently. Yes, your mother would joke about it. she said Elizabeth had tried to win me over first, but she ended up being a good sister-in-law. Rachel, who had been examining the forged letter, looked at Patricia with a knowing expression. Is your Aunt Elizabeth still alive? Yes, she lives in a nursing home in Los Angeles, Richard replied. But why? We need to confirm, but I think we've figured out who wrote this letter, Rachel concluded, holding up the envelope. Someone who wanted Mr. Johnson for herself. All eyes turned to Patricia, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. This is ridiculous. You're making up conspiracy theories about something that happened 60 years ago. Aunt Elizabeth confessed, didn't she? Michael asked, watching his aunt's reaction closely. She told you what she did. Patricia crossed her arms defensively. And what if she did? What does it matter now? Everyone moved on with their lives. Mom and Dad were happy together. Mr. Johnson let out a deep sigh, a mix of sadness and understanding. So it's true? Elizabeth wrote that letter pretending to be Helen. Patricia hesitated but finally nodded. She told me when I had to move her to the nursing home 5 years ago. She said it was her biggest regret, but at the time she thought she was doing the right thing because you and Mom were perfect for each other. And my mother never knew why William never answered her letters, Rachel murmured, feeling a deep sadness for the missed opportunity. She waited for months before finally giving up and moving permanently to New York. Mr. Johnson closed his eyes, absorbing the impact of the revelation. 60 years of his life based on a lie. 60 years believing Helen had abandoned him, when in truth she had waited for him just as he had waited for her. Is that why you're so desperate to sell the pharmacy? Richard asked his sister. Did Aunt Elizabeth ask you to? Some kind of compensation for her guilt? Patricia lowered her gaze. She needs special care. The nursing home is threatening to transfer her to a public facility if we don't pay the overdue fees. She has no one but me. You should have told us, Richard said with disappointment. We could have found another solution without selling Dad's legacy. Mr. Johnson, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Patricia, dear, I understand your concern for Elizabeth. She's family, despite what she did. But deceiving your own family is never the way. He reached out to his daughter, who took his hand with tears in her eyes. Forgive me, Dad. I just wanted to handle everything without bothering anyone. Some things can't be handled alone, he replied gently. That's why we have a family. Michael, who had been thoughtful, interjected. We could use part of Grandpa's retirement fund to help Aunt Elizabeth without selling the pharmacy. And maybe we can modernize it, make it more profitable. Richard agreed, relieved to find a solution that pleased everyone. Emily, who had listened carefully, tugged at Mr. Johnson's sleeve. Do you still love Grandma Helen? She asked with the innocence only a child could have. The old man smiled, looking at the photo of young Helen. Some loves never completely die, Emily. They stay tucked away in a special corner of the heart. So Grandma and you were soulmates, concluded the little girl with conviction. That's why I could see you were alive when no one else did. Grandma sent me to save you. The adults exchanged emotional glances, moved by the child's interpretation. Maybe you're right, little one, agreed Mr. Johnson, stroking Emily's curly hair. Maybe Helen found a way to mend what was broken so long ago. At that moment, Dr. Wilson entered the room for the routine checkup. He was surprised to find so many people gathered, especially with the emotionally charged atmosphere. Having a family reunion? He asked, concerned for his patient. Something like that, Doctor, replied Mr. Johnson with a serene smile. We're rediscovering lost connections. Well, I have good news, announced the doctor after checking the elderly man's vitals. If you keep progressing like this, you can go home in 3 days. Your recovery is truly remarkable. Mr. Johnson looked at Emily with a knowing smile. I have an excellent doctor taking care of me, Doctor. The best I could ask for. Emily beamed, proud of the role she had played in the old man's recovery. Rachel, watching her daughter, felt immense gratitude. What had seemed like an embarrassing incident at the funeral home had turned into a story of redemption and discovery that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. 3 days later, as predicted, Mr. Johnson was discharged from the hospital. At Richard's suggestion, and with everyone's agreement, he would spend a few weeks at his son's house for a smoother recovery before returning to his own home. Emily insisted on decorating the guest room with her colorful drawings. a little surprise for Mr. Johnson's arrival. Rachel, who had grown very close to the Johnson family, helped with the preparations, feeling she was somehow fulfilling a connection her mother had never been able to complete. On the day of Mr. Johnson's arrival, everyone gathered in Richard's living room. Even Patricia, now reconciled with the family after confessing the full truth about the plans to sell the pharmacy, joined in with genuine joy. When the car pulled up in front of the house, Emily was the first to run to the door. "He's here," she announced excitedly. Richard helped his father out of the car and up the few steps to the entrance. Despite his age and recent traumatic experience, Mr. Johnson seemed more cheerful and full of life than he had in years. "Welcome home, Dad," said Richard, moved to have his father back, a second chance few ever got. "Thank you, son," replied the old man, hugging him with surprising strength. "It's good to be back among the living." As he stepped inside, he was greeted with applause and warm embraces. Emily danced with excitement, barely able to wait to show him the room she had decorated. "Come see, Mr. Johnson, I have a surprise for you." Leading him down the hall, she flung open the guest room door with a dramatic flourish. Mr. Johnson paused on the threshold, overwhelmed by what he saw. The walls were covered in colorful drawings of plants, flowers, the pharmacy, and, at the center of the main wall, a large portrait of him and Helen, young and holding hands in a rose garden. "Emily," he whispered, lost for words. "I drew you and Grandma as you would have been if you'd stayed together," she explained simply. "Mom helped me with the details to make Grandma look just right." Mr. Johnson hugged the girl tightly, silent tears streaming down his face. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received," he finally said. Rachel stepped closer, also moved. "Emily worked on this every day since we found out about the connection with my mother. She wanted you to know that in some way, you're together now." The elderly man nodded, unable to speak. Michael stepped closer, wrapping an arm around his grandfather's shoulders. "We have another surprise, Grandpa," he announced, signaling to Richard, who briefly left the room. When Richard returned, he carried a small blue velvet box in his hands. "We found this among Grandma's things after she passed," Michael explained. "We never understood its meaning, until now." Mr. Johnson accepted the box with trembling hands. When he opened it, he found a small rose-shaped brooch identical to the one in his own memory box. "I gave Helen a pair of these at our last meeting," he recalled, his voice thick with emotion. "I've kept mine all these years." "And she kept hers," Rachel finished, finally understanding the sentimental value of the small object her mother had never wanted to part with. "See, I told you they were soulmates," Emily exclaimed with the unshakable certainty of a child. Mr. Johnson smiled, wiping away his tears. "You're very wise for your age, little Emily." That evening, after a celebratory dinner to mark Mr. Johnson's return, everyone gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Emily, sitting beside the elderly man in a rocking chair, listened in fascination as he pointed out the different stars beginning to appear in the sky. "Did you know every star has a story?" he told the girl. "Like people?" she asked. "Exactly, like people. Some shine brightly for a short time, others last for centuries, and some seem distant but are actually connected to other stars by invisible bonds. Like you and Grandma Helen," Emily concluded wisely. "Like me and your grandmother," he agreed with a serene smile. Rachel watched them from a distance, marveling at the natural connection between her daughter and this man who, in another life, might have been her grandfather. She thought of her mother and how happy she would have been to know that somehow the love she'd felt for William had found a way to reveal itself through Emily. Robert approached, offering Rachel a cup of tea. "Does your ex-husband know about all this?" he asked curiously. Rachel shook her head. "William's been working overseas for months. He barely keeps in touch with Emily. Maybe one day I'll tell him, but I don't think it would change much." "I see. If I may say so, he's lost a lot by distancing himself from you." Rachel smiled, flattered by the comment. "Thank you. But we're fine now, Emily and I." "And now you have us too," Robert said sincerely. "In a very strange and unexpected way, we're all family now." Michael joined them carrying a folder of documents. "I've been thinking about the pharmacy," he began. "What if we turned it into a modern compounding pharmacy focused on natural products? We could keep the essence of what Grandpa built, but adapt it for today." Robert considered the idea with interest. "It could work. Grandpa has incredible knowledge about medicinal herbs. And Rachel has nursing experience," Michael added, looking at her expectantly. "Maybe you'd be interested in joining the business." The suggestion caught Rachel off guard. "Me? But—" She hesitated, thinking of how she'd been pushed out of her previous job after a mistake she'd never fully had the chance to explain. "I know about the incident at the health clinic," Michael said gently. "And I also know you were unfairly blamed for something that wasn't entirely your fault. My contacts at the hospital confirmed it." Rachel felt tears welling in her eyes, moved that someone finally believed her. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Robert encouraged. "It would be perfect to have you working with us. And Emily could spend more time with Grandpa, learning about the plants she loved so much." Rachel looked at her daughter, who was laughing at something Mr. Johnson had said. The idea of becoming part of that family, of building something new, based on such deep and meaningful connections, felt right in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. "I'll think it over carefully," she promised, feeling for the first time in years that the future held bright possibilities. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Johnson regained his strength quickly, much to the doctor's surprise. Dr. Wilson even remarked that he had never seen such a remarkable recovery in a patient of that age, especially after such a traumatic episode of catalepsy. "It must be the will to live," the doctor suggested during a follow-up visit. "Some people find a new purpose that drives them." Mr. Johnson smiled, looking at Emily as she swung her legs in the chair beside him. "Let's just say I had a good reason to come back." The pharmacy, which had been closed since Mr. Johnson's supposed passing, reopened with a small ceremony. The whole town showed up, curious to see the man who came back from the dead, as some whispered. Far from being bothered by the attention, Mr. Johnson used the opportunity to tell the true story, how Emily had seen what no one else could and how her persistence had saved his life. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, the pharmacy was gradually transformed, blending the tradition Mr. Johnson had built over decades with innovations brought by Michael and Rachel, who had accepted the offer to join the family business. The natural remedies section became famous in the region, attracting customers from nearby towns. Emily, now a constant presence at the pharmacy after school, had set up a little consultation corner where she greeted customers with her personalized drawings. "Medicine for the soul," as Mr. Johnson affectionately called them. Patricia, who had confessed her mistakes and asked the family for forgiveness, took charge of the business's finances, proving to be extremely capable in the role. The income from the revitalized pharmacy allowed her to keep her Aunt Elizabeth in the care home with all the necessary support. On a particularly pleasant spring afternoon, 6 months after the incident at the funeral home, Mr. Johnson took Emily to see a special place, the garden behind the pharmacy, which he had kept, locked away for decades. "This was my secret spot," he explained, unlocking a small wooden gate. "Not even Richard and Patricia came here often." Emily stepped inside with wide eyes, amazed by what she saw. Roses of every color bloomed in carefully arranged beds, forming a pattern that from above would resemble a heart. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, running to the center of the garden. "This garden started with 2 rose bushes," Mr. Johnson said, sitting on a weathered wooden bench. "A red one and a pink one. Helen and I planted them together, the last time we saw each other." Emily sat beside him, listening to the story with fascination. "Are they still here?" "Yes, those 2 right there." He pointed to 2 particularly sturdy rose bushes growing intertwined. 60 years and they're still blooming, together as they always should have been." The girl studied the flowers for a moment, thoughtful. "Do you think Grandma knew they were still here?" "I'm sure she did," he replied with a serene smile. "Helen always knew where to find beauty, even in the most unlikely places." At that moment, Rachel appeared at the gate, looking for her daughter. There you are. Michael was worried, thinking you'd left without telling anyone. Mr. Johnson motioned for her to join them. I was showing Emily the secret garden. I thought it was time. Rachel stepped in, equally amazed by the hidden beauty. Mom would have loved to see this, she remarked, gently touching a pink rose. She kept roses like these in our garden in New York all through my childhood. It's no coincidence. Mr. Johnson smiled. These roses are a special variety, not easily found. Helen must have taken some cuttings when she left. The three of them stood in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. It was Emily who finally spoke. Can we do something special with this garden? What do you have in mind, dear? Mr. Johnson asked curiously. We could open it for people to visit, like a memory garden. People could come here to remember those they love. Rachel and Mr. Johnson exchanged touched glances, moved by the girl's sensitivity. I think that's a wonderful idea, the old man agreed. Helen would have loved knowing her garden was bringing comfort to others. We could hold a small opening ceremony, Rachel suggested, excited by the idea. Maybe next month when the roses are in full bloom. And I can make drawings. To decorate, Emily added, already planning her creations. Mr. Johnson nodded, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. Then it settled. Helen's garden will be open to all who seek a little beauty and comfort. In the days that followed, news of the secret garden's opening spread through the small town. People were curious to see the place Mr. Johnson had kept private for so long. Emily worked tirelessly on her drawings, creating illustrations of roses and other flowers to line the path to the garden. Richard and Michael organized the garden's renovation, making it accessible without spoiling its natural beauty. Patricia oversaw the finances, ensuring everything stayed within budget. Rachel contributed her knowledge of medicinal plants, identifying species in the garden that could be used in the pharmacy. The night before the opening ceremony, Mr. Johnson called Emily for a private talk in the garden, now completely transformed and even more beautiful. I have something for you, little one, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Emily opened it carefully and found a delicate rose-shaped brooch, similar to the ones Helen and William had exchanged in their youth, but smaller and with a modern touch. It's beautiful, she exclaimed in awe. I had it made especially for you, Mr. Johnson explained, so you'll always remember that some bonds are so strong, not even time can break them. Emily hugged the old man tightly, deeply moved by the gift. I'll take care of it forever, she promised, just like I take care of you and your plants. Mr. Johnson laughed, touched by the purity of this child's love, which had entered his life so unexpectedly. You know, Emily, for a long time, I thought my life was coming to an end, that I'd lived all there was to live, but then you came along and showed me there are always new beginnings, even when we think every door is closed. The girl smiled with the wisdom that defined her. Grandma Helen always said, as long as there are flowers to plant, there's hope. Mom told me. That sounds exactly like something she'd say, the old man confirmed, a nostalgic gleam in his eyes. The next day, Helen's garden was officially opened to the public. A small plaque at the entrance briefly told the story of a love interrupted and then rediscovered through generations. The townspeople came in droves, many bringing their own tales of love lost or found again. Emily, proudly wearing her rose brooch, guided visitors through the garden, eagerly explaining the meaning of each section. Mr. Johnson watched from his bench, with Rachel by his side. Your daughter is truly special, he remarked, observing Emily patiently explaining the significance of the different rose colors to an elderly lady. She always has been, Rachel agreed, but you were the one who truly saw it when the rest of the world doubted her. Just as Helen always saw the best in me, the old man reflected. Perhaps that's the real miracle, always having someone who sees us as we truly are, even when we can't see it ourselves. Michael approached, accompanied by a young doctor he'd met during his grandfather's hospitalization. Grandpa, this is Dr. Laura. She'd like to discuss a potential joint project between the hospital and our pharmacy for complementary treatments. Mr. Johnson smiled, noticing the glance between his grandson and the doctor. Some bonds, he thought, began in the most surprising ways. As the afternoon wore on, the visitors gradually dispersed, leaving only the family in the garden. Richard proposed a toast with homemade lemonade. "To the second chance we all received," he said, raising his glass. "To the family we found when we least expected it," Rachel added. "To Emily, our little heroine," Michael chimed in. "And to Helen," Mr. Johnson finished, emotion in his voice, "who even in absence brought us all together." Emily, seated between Rachel and Mr. Johnson, smiled contentedly. She looked up at the sky, now painted with the hues of sunset, and for a moment imagined her grandmother smiling down, pleased to see her love had finally found its way back. That night, after everyone had left, Mr. Johnson lingered alone in the garden a little longer. He gazed at the roses that had grown intertwined over 6 decades, weathering seasons, storms, and even the separation of their original caretakers. "Thank you, Helen," he whispered into the night breeze, "for never truly leaving me." And perhaps it was just the moonlight playing tricks, but for an instant he could have sworn he saw 2 butterflies dancing above the rose bushes, one white and one gold, their wings shimmering in the darkness like reachable stars. The end. Dear reader, if this story touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of young Emily's intuition? Your opinion is valuable to us and helps us continue creating heartfelt stories like this one. Until next time.